Thanks very much for that. Hi, everyone from Turrbal Yagara country, north of Brisbane. I can't hear any background sound, so if anyone says anything, I don't know how I'm going to know that something's been said.
We've got microphones, Nick, so we'll pop them on.
Right, okay, great, thanks. Yeah. Oh, hi, everyone. Look at that. Wow, what a crowd. Okay, I'll just share my screen and my slides here. Now, these slides are actually prepared for a particular purpose, not just for this session here. It's a task that Sophie and I and others in the Indigenous Data Network Catalogue project have been going through with our partners. And so we don't have to go through the slides exactly in the sort of timing and sequence that they've been created. Now, I gather that there's sort of 20 minutes-ish here. So I'll try and go through all of these slides quite quickly in about 10 minutes, and then we can have some questions.
Just very quick. I think Levi's intent, I think he'd prefer in the time if we can go through the online metadata editor and the vote sort of catalogue itself. Sorry, Nick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just because we do have limited time, and then hopefully we can, well, if we don't have any questions, I'm always happy for a PowerPoint to come up.
Okay, well, do you want me to just keep going in around 10 minutes? Is that the sort of time we want there, Sophie?
If we aim for that, it would probably be a good point to pause and see what we get back.
Okay, no problems. All right, let me share my screen and we can do that. Okay, so I will still start with the slides because it's all kind of in the same space, and I'll get to the two things that you want to see following. So if you need to tell me if you can see the screen okay?
Yep.
Yep, okay. So the little task that these slides talk about is test scoring some metadata from UQ. And so these are catalogue entries of objects in their library and other catalogues, archive catalogues. And what we've done is, following the kind of processes in the project that we've been working on, we've looked at the metadata and we have fiddled around with it and tried to establish some fair and care scores for it. So just whipping through, there's a small methodology here where we access the catalogue's metadata, both the human and machine readable forms of that metadata. And then we took the details from that metadata and entered it into the metadata entry tool, which I will show in just a minute. That tool automatically generated care and fair scores. And then what I've done is spent some time working out how to improve those scores and just, reflecting on the metadata in general. So just to show you what we started with, there are items in the catalogue that look something like this. This picture is probably not as big as it could be. I'll just make this a bit bigger. So it's a file, it's an archived file from a long time ago, and it's got the metadata that you can see on the screen. So it tells you who created it, what repository it's in, etc. I think it's fair to say that the kind of metadata we're seeing here is standard archival metadata. So the first point I'll make, which I might make later on several times, is that this metadata its intention is to help you archive and manage this resource. It's not actually intended at Indigenous data governance. And that's not surprising because this metadata has been captured some time ago. And clearly it wasn't the focus of the system to aim for improved or really good Indigenous data governance. So, and we can see that in the way it's structured. Okay, so I won't dwell on the metadata, but what I will do for UQ when actually communicating this is to look at the metadata and step through elements of the metadata and talk about bits and pieces. And again, this is metadata that's aimed at archiving, not Indigenous governance. Then we talk about what we could do to improve that metadata in line with the principles that we've got about Indigenous data governance, right down to lovely suggestions in green, happy color, and the scores that we generate. So let's actually look at the tool now and see how it works. Actually, we looked at several cases, and the data that I've actually preloaded into the tool is not for this case, it's for the next one down. So it looks something like this, but let's see it anyway. Okay. So I'm just going to the metadata entry tool online. Now, what the tool lets you do is it lets you just save whatever you were working on before. So you can see that in this form entry, there's a title here, and the title is The Nomads of the Australian Desert. That's one of those other UQ, I think it's a rare book in this case. Now, what happens is these scores over on the right here are reflective of live calculations against this metadata. So if we change things in here, we'll see those scores change. And to know exactly what you've got to do to increase the F, the A, the I, and the R, and the CARE scores, you can actually just click on these things and they will tell you. So for instance, let's see if we can
While you're going through,
change.
Your screen's a little bit narrow for the view on here. Can you
okay.
Just zoom in on the window or something so it's a little bit more expanded for people?
Yeah,
here?
let's do that. All right, let's see if I can do that. Hang on a second. Is that better?
That is improved. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Now just tell me, Sophie, when I click on this, does the pop-up become visible?
It does.
It does. Great. Okay, okay. So folks, you've got the scores here on the right. They're always present. If I click on them, it'll tell you exactly how they're calculated. So let's just shrink that down. Okay, so here's F findable and F1. So the first thing is, has it got an identifier? Now, we've told this system to automatically assign an identifier, so it's got one. Is the identifier URL? Yes, it is. It's got that one. But it hasn't got this third point here. The identifier is a globally unique, citable, and persistent one. And that's because the Indigenous Data Network's tools natively don't use things like Pearl.org or Australian Government Linked Data Working Group persistent identifiers. But if we enter one of those in, we should see that checked. So let's just try that. I'm just going to make this up. I'm just going to put in. So Pearl.org is what you might think of as a good identifier. Now let's see, has that changed our score? Let's see. It has. So you can see it's now checked this last box in F1. Okay, now let's just, again, I'm just making this up, but we're just seeing what we can do to alter the scores and understand what metadata corresponds to what scoring. So let's just look at, A is a bit hard to deal with. Oh, no, it's not. Here we go, A1. Metadata retrievable, blah, blah, blah. No, that's a bit hard to deal with live like this. Let's just see what else we can have here. Aha, here we go, R1. So R1 has a license. We get 2 points if we actually had a license indicated. Now, this data from UQ doesn't have a license indicated, but again, it could do, and it probably should have, and if it did, it would increase the score. So let's try that. So we go down to here, rights. And I'm just making this up. I'm just going to select a Creative Commons license. Go back to our fair scores. There we go, has a license, and that's become green now. We've got all the points that we could have got in that bit there. So you can see that the instructions here kind of tell you what you need. I think there's a bit of room for improvement in describing exactly what fields in the metadata could correspond to the scores here. So for instance, when it says has a license, I mean, I know, because I've used this tool before, where that license would be and how to put it in, but we might need a little bit more instruction, I think, to help people. It'll say something like, has a license. If you want to enter a license, go to the right section here and choose a license, etc., or provide a license. Anyway, so it's fairly straightforward to use in that way. Now, the FAIR scores we're pretty comfortable with because the methods that we're using to score the FAIR scores are not ones that we've invented. They're really taken from the ARDC's FAIR self-assessment tool, and we've just translated them into reading the information that you would self-enter into reading from this metadata form, which is following standard metadata patterns. So we think it's a fairly robust FAIR score. It should be fairly uncontroversial. We are expecting to receive feedback and we'll tinker with it, but it's not particularly tricky. The CARE score is a bit harder, and that's because CARE as a mechanism was not quite set up to be a metric-based scoring thing, I think. I mean, it's principles for improved Indigenous data governance, but it doesn't mean that it translates very nicely into technical scores of the sort that we're doing here. So CARE scores follow the same kind of mechanisms that I just showed you for care scores, but it can be a bit harder to work out what you have to do. Well, here's one though. Data has access rights selectors. That's a straightforward one. Let's see if we can just fill out C1. So if we come back here, go to rights, access rights. Let's just choose one. Again, it doesn't matter which one. You just have to have indicated it. Now, if we come back to the care score, and there we go, we've now completed all of C1. Now, again, a further warning about the care scores. In terms of how you calculate the care scores here from metadata, some of the care, the C, the A, the R, and the E are kind of dependent. So it's kind of all or nothing. If you do certain things that get you good scores in A, authority to control, you would get good scores in E. And the opposite is true. If you don't get a good score in A, you can't possibly get a good score in E. And that's indicated here where it says something like, let's see, well, in this case here, E3. If E1 and E3 have been fully scored, then you can do the following. So it is a bit of dependency here. Again, E1, it says here, you get points in E1 if A1 is fully scored. And again, what this means is this dependence, and it's kind of all or nothing. You're either going to get great scores or not good scores. And that's just a feature of the way the care metrics are set up and the way we can calculate them. Again, we expect to receive feedback on this over time and to improve the happiness of people using the care scores in the way that we've calculated them. This is not the final way that these things might be interpreted. Okay, so that's sort of a live demo. I will just quickly shoot back to my slides just for a little summary then. So initially, I scored these data sets from UQ just on the metadata as I saw them. And the scores were not brilliant because, again, the metadata was targeted at managing archival objects, not really FAIR and care scores. Some parts of the FAIR scores were great. The fact that they had metadata in a technical form meant that it was, instantly interoperable and so on. And it's pretty easy to improve the FAIR scores of the objects. The care scores are going to take a bit of work. And the main, I guess, conceptual things that need doing to improve the care scores are really just more information about the governance of these objects. So if these Indigenous data objects or Indigenous physical objects, if there's a known relationship between the people that those objects are from or about and the university should indicate that. That would markedly increase the care scores. They should definitely include things like licenses, access conditions, and governance arrangements. The fact that the university assigns, the overall role of consulting, about how this thing should be used to Indigenous people, that would make a big difference. And then the last thing, which is straightforward, was to include, if they have it, contact information about who you would talk to about getting access to this thing. Now, maybe that's just the university catalogue itself, but maybe it's somebody else. Maybe the archive holds an object, and if you want to see this object or use it or interact with it, you need to go and talk to someone. So that kind of information about, and policies. Any policies that the university has should be indicated as well. So at the moment, that's not been a consideration in the archival system. There's policies are understood to apply, but you just assume that that's the case. But the way these scoring metrics work is that you need to state that. You need to say, this is an Indigenous thing, and we have an Indigenous data policy that applies to it. So those are the kinds of things that would make a big difference. Okay, that's probably on time. Sophie, do you want to tell me what to do next?
Well, I'll open it up to the room and see if we have any questions in the first instance.